And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us, and one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it, and that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight's episode, we're being joined by my guest, Kathleen. Kathleen has been investigating the Knights Templar down in South America. She's made some interesting discoveries. Looking forward to having her on here tonight and talking a little bit about that. Before we bring her on, if you've ever had an experience and you'd like to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, there's a couple things you can do. You can either go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section, or you can send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. Either way works for me. Just make sure to reach out and get a message to me, and we will get something scheduled for a future episode. If you'd like to help the podcast out, please share it around. Word of mouth is one of the best ways of helping the podcast out. You can also leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to Tinfoil Tales at, so just make sure to click the 5 stars, and it helps me with the rankings. If you're like me and you don't like hearing ads on the episodes, you can go over to the Patreon and become a member over there. You get early access to all the episodes, and they're all ad-free. There's also some exclusive content available only on Patreon. It's $1.99 a month, so it's worth checking out if you're interested. I do have a P.O. box and a phone number where you can reach out to me or mail me some stuff that you think is weird that I might find interesting. You can find more information about that in the show notes. Make sure to follow me around on all the social medias. We're going to go ahead now and bring Kathleen on and dive into the conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight, Kathleen. Thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
You're very welcome. I'm excited to be here tonight.
Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, boy, where do I start? I had an ND in 1990 that sort of precipitated all of this, preceded everything that I'm doing now. And I came out of that experience with just a real, I guess, almost obsession to delve into history, dig in. I had already had a background in researching like Leonardo da Vinci and esoteric belief systems and spiritual belief systems and Masons, and I was finding some connections, but it wasn't really. I wouldn't say that it was really my priority. In 1990, after the near death, it became my priority. I had a very interesting experience, and it involved being in a dimensional reality, what anybody wants to call that, beyond physical reality, where I got to see glimpses of what I believe were a possible future for us here on this planet. And I decided to then commit to that, to participate and come back out of the near death and return and complete my mission, or whatever you want to call it, my path, my destiny, to assisting in any way that I could to bring about, this very beautiful future that, very promising future that we have available to us, to mankind, if we make the right decisions and choices, which that's debatable at this point. So,
Right.
In our decisions and choices, we seem to have really excelled in our technological advances, but we haven't maintained a balance with our spirituality and our connection with this planet. We've really become untethered, if you might. That's probably a best word. untethered with nature and our natural process. I mean, we're now considering AI from consciousness into robots, which is just insane. It's just, from my perspective, that is completely insane. We're removing ourselves from nature, and in the meantime, we're not doing a whole lot for our planet. Anyway, so our bottom line came out of the near-death experience. I started doing all this research, and all these years later, I ended up with a double bachelor's, double master's, and a PhD in metaphysical sciences, and discovered a Knights Templar Cave in 2015. Fast forward to that, which was a complete shock. I had no intention. That was not my intention for being in Brazil. I didn't even know the Templars had been in South America at that point in time. All I knew was Templar presence in throughout Europe and England, the UK, Scotland, and possibly I knew that there was very strong evidence for their presence in North America, but I didn't know anything about their presence in South America at that time. So it was a real shock to me when I was hiking with a girlfriend and we had a guide, and he said, "You want to go into this cave?" As after this long story, that he asked us if we wanted to go into this cave, and it was very, very hot that day. We'd already hiked about 5 kilometers and straight down a mountain. I mean, in the middle of nowhere, and just nowhere. There's nothing there, wilderness. And he asked us if we wanted to go in there and drink some water, have our snacks, and take a break before we hiked back up the mountain. We said sure. So we approached this, which you couldn't even tell it was a cave. You couldn't even tell that it was there. It was just bushes all in front of this sort of mound that looked like a small hill. And he lifts up the bushes, and I mean, I was just absolutely flabbergasted. And I just said to him, I said, "My God, what is a Knights Templar cross doing out here in the middle of Brazil?" Anyway, he rattled off a bunch of stuff in broken English and Portuguese mostly, which I had later translated. And he really didn't have any idea why. I went inside at that point and I started investigating some of the graffiti that was in there, and I became more and more convinced that it was a Templar site. And but I didn't have any information. I had no background whatsoever on this, on this location. Nothing, having no connection to the Templars that I was aware of. So this presented an opportunity. And I decided right then and there that I was going to do something to bring this to the world. This was a really important history-changing discovery. So when I left Brazil, 9 days later, I got home, and 9 days later, my house burned to the ground. I had been a college officer, in the Butte fire, Northern California in 2015, September 11th. My house went up in flames in about less than 3 minutes. It was just 3,800 degrees, and everything was incinerated, including all my curriculum, all my art supplies, everything that I had been using for teaching art for 20 years. So my career basically went up in flames. And shortly after that, about 6.5, 7 weeks after that, I had a liver transplant, which I had been putting off and putting off and putting off. And finally, I had developed some really serious cancer tumors in my liver, and I needed to get this done. So I agreed to the operation, to the surgery, had the liver transplant on November 5th. And when I came out of that experience, I needed to make some decisions about what I was going to do with the rest of my life. So, I decided to just take a year, and the college was after me. When am I going to return all this? They wanted an answer, and I just couldn't give them one until I really was sure about the direction I was heading. So one of the reasons that I had been hesitant about getting this liver transplant was because I don't handle medications well. And when you have a transplant, organ transplant, typically you're required to take anti-rejection medications, immunosuppression, for the rest of your life. And they cause other damage in the body. With me, within about 3 to 4 years, I lost almost 100% of my hearing. So now I wear a cochlear implant just to be able to hear. And so, by the end of a year, I'd already lost so much hearing caused by nerve damage from these immunosuppressants. And I had to tell the college I wasn't going to be able to come back. I had to take a disability leave from work because I couldn't hear good enough to even interact with my students. So then it was, okay, so what am I going to do with this discovery? I've got to do something with this discovery. So I decided to go back in 2017 into Brazil and see if I could rediscover the cave and film it. So I talked to some friends over there that I had met, and they introduced me to a videographer, Trajano Paiva, and he had done some work for Jacques Cousteau, so I was pretty sure, he was going to be a pretty decent photographer. Anyway, we got over there in 2017. There was a huge fire right surrounding the whole area where the cave was. And I was unable to get in to, it was impossible. The fire raged on for about 2 weeks, and, I had to finally leave to come back. So that was a disappointment and a setback. But in 2018, I persevered, and, Trajano and I decided, we agreed that we would meet in July of 2018. And sure enough, after several days of trying to rediscover this cave, because all my landmarks, everything had been destroyed by the fire the year before, everything. I mean, I basically rediscovered it by intuition. But I did rediscover it. It was filmed. Right after that, I came home. The end of 2018, we started creating the film, putting footage together to create the documentary, The Brazilian Templar's Mystery, which has been out on Gaia now for about 4 years. And it's just now actually, we shopped it with Film Hub, and it's now going to be coming out on Amazon Prime and possibly some other networks too. So anyway, so that just developed. That happened. One thing led to another, and I was introduced to some people that, were efficient in film documentary. We won like 65 awards for the film. So I accomplished that, and that led me from Brazil to Portugal, because I wanted to find out where the Templars came from, what year the cave was dug out, why they were there, why were they in the middle? I mean, we're talking in the middle of nowhere in Brazil. It's like 2,500 to 3,000 kilometers from the coast. So why were they? How did they get there? I had all these questions. And so I went to Portugal. I interviewed a Templar cross expert who basically, he told me that the cross was definitely Templar related cross above the cave. And I didn't have good footage of the graffiti inside the cave until 2019, because there were spiders and bats in there. And at one point in 2018, I tried to go in to really, photograph these symbols. And I looked down, and I've got spiders all over coming up my boots. And so I had to get out of there, and we decided that we were going to come back and try it again later, which we did. And I was able to finally get in there and get some good footage of that.
And you're braver than I am.
Yeah, later on. But so Portugal has been a wealth of information. I mean, just absolutely a wealth of information. I did discover that the Templars definitely came from Portugal into Brazil. And everything that we've put together, I've worked with fellow other researchers on this. Everything we've put together, it looks like the cave was dug out sometime in the 12th to early 14th century, talking about before 1307 when they were rounded up by Philip the Fair in France. And I later found out, of course, in 2019 also, that the cave was a gold mine, is a gold mine. There's no gold in it now. It's been completely mined, but it had been mined by the Templars for many, many years. And that, interestingly enough, helped to explain why the king in Portugal at the time of the Templars' demise in the rest of Europe had plenty of money. He was building, all sorts of things were happening in Portugal. They were sailing, all over. They had a full naval fleet. They had money. All the rest of the monarchs in Europe were broke because of the Crusades. Their coffers were completely drained, but not King Dinos in Portugal. So that helped to shed some light on that whole thing. And since then, I've also discovered that they were very likely also in Peru bringing back silver. So here they are probably bringing silver, and I know they were bringing back gold back and forth. And I recently, in March of this year, went back to Portugal again. This was my 4th trip. And I found the actual port where they left from. With the help of a fellow researcher over there, I was able to discover 2 commanderies and a possible school, a nautical school there in Peniche on the coast of Portugal. And it's just phenomenal. There was a small church in the adjacent town in Peniche also, that within the interior of that church were the exact same crosses that I had discovered inside the cave. The graffiti was exactly the same. And that church was built by the Templars between 1040 and 1090. So, I'm really starting to get somewhere in terms of possible dating. Also, I photographed all of the graffiti in Dome, France, where they were held until 1310, and also in Chinon, France, from 1310 to 1314, when they eventually burned the stake. They were brought into Paris and burned. And again, I find the same crosses in both Dome and Chinon, where the Templars were held. So what I've established so far is that anytime between 1040 or 1090, I would probably safely say anytime between 1090 and 1350, the Templars were over there mining gold back and forth. And that had a piece of property there that I discovered that was just below the cave in a little town called Moino. And it looks like they had some type of sluice box set up, which looked like very much a sluice box that we would, use for mining gold, set up alongside the hillside just below the cave. There was also a mill wheel that I found one actually in Tomar in the castle, the Convent del Cristo. And I also found another one in Sintra in the museum that were almost identical to the one that was there on this property. So I'm really starting to put some facts together and some evidence together. And, and then this latest piece was how the Templars got there. Was they hooked up with the Amazonian tribes because apparently they had some similar ritualistic or initiation processes that they both understood and both knew. This also happened in North America, according to Timothy Hogan, who is the Crown Master for the Templars, and we've talked about this at length. He and I, that's why they got along with the Native Americans very well here in the North America as well, is because they had many of the same beliefs and their core beliefs and their initiation processes. You can find Templar crosses throughout North America on Native American pottery. So And I'm still looking for that evidence in Brazil, which I haven't discovered at this point. But the Native Americans there, the Amazonian tribes there that do come in to Alto Paraiso, which is right where the cave is, just where I discovered this cave. And they have been coming in to Alto Paraiso from the Amazon jungle, migrating for their spiritual rituals in Alto Paraiso every year, and they have for hundreds and hundreds of years. So when I went in to interview them in the Amazon jungle in 2021, they do have stories of intermingling with white men and white robes, and not that specific tribe, but there's talk of this. They don't keep records like we do. It's all oral transmission from generation to generation. So, but they do have an understanding that there was interaction with some type of people that came in from the coast. So anyway, so that's, I've pretty much answered all my questions at this point. I'm just continuing to look for more evidence. And then I also discovered that there's more caves that have Templar markings in them that very well may be additional gold mines as well. So I'm going to be going back to Brazil in February, this next February, and see what else I can find over there.
It's interesting to me that the time frame of that they were already over on this continent before it was quote unquote discovered by Columbus. So
oh yeah,
that's
there's some interesting stories that are coming out about Columbus now too, which I don't know where, but Columbus has recently his DNA has been recently done and decoded, and they have discovered that he was not indeed Italian or Spanish. He was Portuguese. And I happened to interview one of his descendants when I was there in March. And I got a very interesting story, which will be coming out in a documentary next year. I'm going to be producing that film with all her genealogy and footage and the explanations behind that. But Christopher Columbus's name was not even Christopher Columbus. So he was of a completely different family. And there's a whole lot of, I have a great deal of evidence that I'll be bringing out to the world in the form of a documentary very soon about that. So
I'll definitely have to look for that one when it comes out. Now, when it comes to the Templars, they originated more for the Middle East, wasn't it?
Well, they were in the Holy Land. Mm-hmm. Yes, they were, and they were there for 9 years before they were active in the Crusades. And they went right straight to the Temple Mount, to the stables. And here these men were from affluent families. And, it was always, it kind of struck me odd that they went to the stables to set up camp and, instead of going to the castle and staying, with the king there. It really made no sense to me until I realized that I made a connection with the 9 knights, some of the names of the 9 knights with an order of knights that were created during the time of Zerubbabel, who organized this order of knights to protect the builders of the Second Temple. Now, if that is correct, then it's very possible that these same families passed down this information of where the Temple Mount was. They would have known exactly where it was, what was underneath it. And, because they began excavating immediately. They were down there underneath the stables and excavating. And nobody really knows what they found. But talking with Timothy Hogan again, he's a wealth of information. He's been a great resource, help with me, assistance. They also discovered ossuaries of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, their children, John the Baptist, and one of Jesus's brothers and his mother. So they were doing a great deal of excavating while they were in the Holy Land, long before they ever got involved heavily with the Crusades or protecting pilgrims, which I don't really see any evidence for them having protected pilgrims. They later developed a banking system to keep people from being robbed by giving them a note that they would take into Jerusalem, give to their Templar brothers, and while the money was held in France, typically, or Portugal, or wherever their departure place of origin where they departed from. And then this note was given to them, and which they gave to the Templars in Jerusalem. So that minimized, some of the theft and robbery and things that were going on. But you have to also remember that Templars were not the only order of knights there at that point in time. You had the Hospitallers. There were numerous other orders of knights that were in the area fighting the Crusades. So the Templars didn't really get active for quite a long time. So what were they doing? And according to Timothy Hogan, they were excavating, and they now have possession of 6 of the 10 Arks of the Covenant, and numerous documents that date way, way back, just all sorts of information. And I haven't personally gotten to see this stuff yet, and I'm hoping that at one point I will be able to see it with my own eyes. But I do know that the Templars originated in Greece. From my research, they originally banded together in Greece. They were looking for esoteric information, knowledge, wisdom. Their original intent, in fact, I believe is still their intent, was to bring about an age of enlightenment and a world of peace and harmony and equality amongst all people. Religious tolerance, etc. And they did accomplish this in Portugal. They actually created a nation that's now, according to Freddie Silva, a Templar nation, which I believe it was, where they brought in the Cathars. When they originally conquered the Iberian Peninsula, before it was ever even Portugal, they conquered the Moors, they conquered Islam, and there were also Lusitanian indigenous people there. And once they conquered these people, they invited them to stay. They gave them lands, and they gave them means to make a living, to be able to survive. And then they later, when the Catholic Church decided that, the Jews were heretics, the Cathars were heretics, the Druids were heretics, the Celts were heretics, they brought them all into Portugal. Many people don't know that there were thousands of Cathars that survived Montsegur. They were brought into Portugal, and they were given lands, and they were given the means to build their assistance in building castles, building buildings. There were even farmlands. And I've discovered Cathar crosses in numerous places on churches, the backs of churches, and the ruins of castles all throughout Portugal. So this is what they were doing, and this is what they began in 1040, which they, eventually traveled into Constantinople, which was the spiritual hub at that time in history. That's where everybody was, the Sufis, the Sikhs, the, Hindus, the Gnostic Christians, all the Gnostic Christians. There were numerous sects of Christian belief. They were not canonized. They were they were canonized by Constantine in 300 and something AD. But these were the remains of the Gnostic beliefs. The people that had these Gnostic beliefs, they settled in Constantinople, because these beliefs were not Christian per se. What Jesus was preaching and what John the Baptist was preaching was not called Christianity. It wasn't even called Christianity. So, and I found evidence in Derinkuyu up in the Cappadocia area in Turkey, where there was up to 20,000 people that were living underground. They had numerous little chapels throughout this area. They were all separate. They were all different. Their narratives were different. Their crosses were different. they all lived apparently in harmony together. But these were people that were fleeing the Holy Land after the crucifixion. And these people, they remained in what's now Turkey, but in that area, Anatolia area. And, during the 10th century all the way up to the 12th or 13th century, Constantinople was this huge spiritual hub, not just of spiritual belief systems, but also education. They had universities, and it was a real intellectual hub. And the Templars went there and they gathered information from the Druze. They gathered information from the Sufis, from the Sikhs, Hindu beliefs. And they brought all this back into Portugal. And by the early 1100s, before they went in, they were in the Holy Land, then they established the country of Portugal. Their ideal, what they wanted to do, what their intention was to bring this information back into Europe and bring about a time of enlightenment. And they had hoped to be able to disperse this knowledge throughout Europe. And, at the same time, we have the Cistercians, Bernard de Clairvaux, who assisted in the development and the establishment of the Templars in 1119. And he was trying to overturn the corruption in the Catholic Church. So, we had what appeared to me at that time, we had an attempt at trying to sort of undermine the power of the Catholic Church, at least in Portugal. They did it. They accomplished it all the way up into the 1500s when the Inquisition finally made its way into Portugal. But it was the last country in all of Europe that the Inquisition managed to get their hooks in, and they began their reign of terror. But the Templars kept that. They kept that country alive and well, and they had a tremendous diversity. And it was almost, I look at it as a prototype for what later became the United States of America, which was also inspired by Templar principles. So that I really believe that they had hoped to bring that same ideal and spread it through Europe. And when it was looking like things were not going to happen in that way, I think at that point they headed to South America, to North America. They were looking at other areas for lands that they could eventually, bring about that dream, that ideal. And, and it was eventually accomplished in the United States. So.
Now, the stuff in Brazil, you said they were mining for gold, you believe. Do you think that they were also bringing over some of the artifacts and relics that they'd seized at one point?
Well, I've had a lot of people they've told me that they think I'm going to find Templar treasure over there. Now, I don't know. If that happens, great. I'll turn it over to the Templars. But I want to photograph it first.
Right.
I want to be able to get photographs of everything. And that is a possibility. It makes sense that they would disperse whatever they did discover in the Holy Land into numerous locations just for safety purposes, and according to Timothy Hogan, they have already uncovered several of these locations. So, it's highly possible. I don't know. I would love to. I would love to be able to come upon that type of discovery. It would be awesome. It'd be amazing. But, but I don't know. I never know what the future's got in store. All I know is the story just keeps unfolding for me, day after day, year after year. And I keep following it. My second documentary is going to be coming out hopefully before the end of the year. We're almost done. We're at the final editing stages with episode 2. So we'll have some more information, and we've already filmed episode 3 and 4. So we'll have some more information for everyone at the end of this year and all through next year. Next year will be a really good year for bringing this information to the public.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you're doing your documentaries and everything, because I think I was originally contacted back in August or September, and I'm pretty sure they said you were overseas. Were you filming for the documentary?
I filmed the first documentary in Brazil and Portugal both.
Okay.
And the second documentary takes place primarily in Brazil. I do have some scenes from Portugal in there. I'm also going to be taking people through the ayahuasca process that I went through. Now, I mentioned that I had a liver transplant and I was on immunosuppression, and they were causing a great deal of damage to my body. Well, when I went into the Amazon jungle, I had a very interesting spiritual experience with the chief and the people there. And I was invited into a ceremony. And ever since that date, which was in July of 2021, I have not had to take anti-rejection meds ever since then. So I'll be talking about that also in the second documentary, which will be hopefully out the end of this year.
For anyone listening who knows kind of how I feel, I don't enjoy the modern medicine literally pushes all these different types of like pills on people. So I think there's natural ways to go about things, but I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
Well, we were much healthier as a species, up until modern medicine.
Mm-hmm.
We've just, we've really done a great deal of destruction with our bodies out of fear-induced, Western medicine. And we really need to depart from that and get back into more nature-sourced remedies, because otherwise we're going to push ourselves right to the door of AI. We'll be so physically incapacitated that we'll be asking for AI.
I think it's kind of already. I think it's already kind of turned in that way.
That's where we're heading. That's where we're headed. And I don't want to participate in that. And there's a whole lot of people that agree with me that are finding other modalities. As a matter of fact, I just went to a meditation. This was what was it? Gosh, I can't remember how they entitled, but it's using light source meditation, and I used it for a shoulder injury that I'd gotten in Portugal, and it worked. I mean, I'm not feeling this. I was thinking I was going to have to go into the doctors for that. I haven't been to the doctors in over 2 years. I try to avoid doctors, but anyway. And it worked. It solved my problem with my shoulder. So there are modalities out there. There's several modalities out there, and that are being developed every day that we don't hear about because they're kept under the rug. Our news stations don't cover these things, and unfortunately, we have to discover them on our own. We have to take responsibility. That's the big word. Take full responsibility for our existence. We can't depend on our government. We can't depend on our medical. We can't depend on education. We can't depend on anyone else. We can't give our power away to anybody else besides ourselves to take responsibility for our existence and our health. So that's my personal belief anyway. And it's worked for me.
I agree. There was one thing I wanted to ask earlier, and I don't know if you touched base on it, but this was actually relating to when you said your house had caught on fire. Did they determine what caused it?
The NDE? Was that the question?
What caused the fire to your house?
Oh, the fire. The fire in that was caused by negligence from a from a utilities company here in California that was also responsible for 5 other fires. Then there was also tremendous amount of damage. There was 65 deaths in one of the fires.
Okay.
And they were also responsible. The same utilities company was also responsible for the Butte fire. And they tried to cover it up. They tried to blame it on a man who was actually there trying to put it out. And they got caught and they in court, and they had to admit that they lied and that they were actually responsible for not maintaining and repairing certain lines that had fallen into a tree branch buried in some dead, brush below. And anyway, and then, apparently their representative that was there, when the fire department called him and asked if he needed help with the fire, he said no. And so the fire spread, and the neighbor came in and tried to help with the whole thing, and they tried to blame it on him, which was just unconscionable. But anyway, it was all overturned in a court of law. They had 2 witnesses that saw the whole thing. So it was uncovered, and many of these people did receive compensation during, for the Butte fire. It burnt something like 90,000 acres. I mean, it was just unbelievable. It went through Amador County all the way up into Calaveras County and clear up into Big Trees. I mean, it was a really, really very, very hot fire. When I talked to the battalion boss, Cal Fire helped me go in and get my goldfish out of the pond 5 days after the fire. He said it was the hottest fire he'd ever worked in his life. It was 3,800 degrees, and it melted. Well, it didn't just melt. It vaporized. I was an artist. I was a figurative sculptor, and I used bronze with, clay and then the lost wax and poured bronze. And I had like 27 bronzes in my house, and all but one vaporized. They didn't melt. There was no bronze slag. There was no metal pieces, nothing remaining. They literally vaporized, turned right back into the elements. The only bronze, which I thought was kind of interesting, the only one that survived was a bust that I had done of Willie Nelson.
That is a hot fire, because that's almost 3 times the normal temperature of what an average fire would be.
Right.
So
and it was 1,800 degrees hotter than the melting point of bronze.
Right. So I'm over here thinking, I was like, what would have made it so hot? That's strange.
Well, it became a firestorm, and it was pulling oxygen as it was moving. It was burning the oxygen that was ahead of it. And it was just in like this tornado. And we saw the fire coming over our ridge. There was this ridge that had a whole bunch of, trees. I lived out in the middle of nowhere in 5 acres. I've always pretty much lived out in the middle of nowhere. But anyway, when we walked outside, because our nephew showed up, thank God, because Cal Fire didn't even know that it had come that far. They didn't even know that whole leg of the fire had come our direction. They didn't even know about it. Anyway, when we walked outside, the fire was, I couldn't even believe it. It looked like it was about 100 feet above the trees. It was just this massive wall of fire tornado that was coming towards us. And we went into immediate panic mode. We had 15 minutes to get out of there. And we barely got out of there with our lives and our cats. And it was unbelievable.
That's one thing that scares me. We actually had a fire just down the road a few weeks back. And there was a massive fire, a building that caught on fire. And then, strangely enough, a couple miles down the same road on the other end, a field caught on fire all in the same night. So it was just weird that this place but it was downwind. So where the field caught on fire, the wind was blowing the opposite direction, so I don't know what would have caused the field to catch on fire, but very weird timing of the whole situation. But that's the one thing that worries me is I'm surrounded by fields. So if they were to ever catch on fire, it's going to come one way or the other is going to come my direction. But,
Right. Yeah. Well, California's been a tinderbox. It was there. I mean, we've been having rain, of course, the last few years, but prior to that, we went for about 7 years with very little rain. Most of our lakes, our water sanctuaries were, were drying up. I mean, you could see they were like 200-300 feet below the normal level everywhere in California. So all the trees were just like matchsticks. It was just primed for a fire. It was perfect conditions for a fire to just come racing through. And it went through Lake County. I had a girlfriend who lived we'd known each other since grade school, and she was in Lake County. She had to evacuate twice from the two fires that were in Lake County. One of which was also caused by the same utilities company. And then she moved up into the Paradise area, and she moved to Grants Pass, Oregon, and she had to evacuate from a fire there. It just chased her. And then she moved into Magalia, which was right next to Paradise when that fire. She had just moved in. They just moved everything into the garage, all their belongings, everything, all the building stuff to remodel that. Everything was in that garage. They had just moved it in, and that night at 3 a.m. they had to evacuate, and they lost everything. I mean, the fire just took out everything. And they had a heck of a time getting out because there were people that were on fire as they were leaving. I mean, they witnessed some really, really traumatic stuff. That was probably the worst of these California fires, was that Paradise Fire.
So at least I'll knock on wood, but I was like, so at least where I live, we don't really have those. Like, I live in Indiana, so there's never been like mass fires, but like I've seen stuff on the news about there's always forest fires in California or up in I think it's like Wyoming had some recently, and just crazy to think about how much of the land's being burnt. And like last year, I know a bunch of Canadas were on fire. So.
Right. Well, in Brazil, what's interesting in Brazil is you have many of the indigenous people that had later become ranchers, and they have cattle ranches all throughout. Brazil is a beautiful country, and there's just a tremendous amount of land. Very little of the land in Brazil is been modernized, where you see businesses and things like that. Mostly these little towns that dot along the highways. With maybe 100 miles, some 50 miles in between. I mean, it's just a tremendously beautiful country of open land. It's just absolutely beautiful. So, but what these farmers do, they have, generation after generation, come through their oral traditions. They still believe in this, burning. They burn the properties, thrash and burn. To fertilize. It fertilizes the soil. It's one of the things it does. And they also get rid of a lot of brush that way, unnecessary brush. Well, some of these fires, though, get out of hand. And that's what happened in 2017 when I was there to try to get back into the cave again, was that this fire that they had started had gotten out of control. And it was just burning, just out of control all over. I don't even know how many acres it burned, but it was a lot of land.
I've never left the country, but I've always wanted to. And Brazil looks like one of the places I'd like to go, but I also want to go over to Europe too. Maybe someday.
Well, Brazil's a little bit like the wild, wild west. And, a little bit. It's not quite that, not quite the same, but it's pretty darn close. You still have your caballeros that you see them all over in all the little towns and little areas, and all the paraiso, they're up and down the street, especially on the weekends. The cowboys, they call them caballeros. they come into town to get a beer or whatever they're going to do, and they're riding their horses. They don't have cars. There's thousands of people in Brazil that don't have vehicles. They have horses. They still ride horses. And there's lots of rodeos, and there's lots of that kind of celebration, of the whole cattle ranching way of life. It's very much alive and well over there. And so, it's got a certain charm though, because it's got this. You have indigenous cultures there that are alive and well. You've got these, this ancient. No, it's not ancient, but it's older culture of cattle ranching and farming, and they're still very, very, very connected to the land over there, and it's very appealing. Alto Paraiso, which is interesting, is a small town. Alto Paraiso means high paradise, which I also found very interesting that was the name of the actual area where the Templar Cave that I discovered is. And just below it is Moinho and San George. St. George was, of course, the story of St. George is very much related to the Templar narrative. Anyway, in Alto Paraiso, Moinho, St. George, and Cavalcante, those areas that are right around the cave, ironically, are made up of people from all over the world, very similar to what the Templars had created in Portugal. And I find it just fascinating, because you walk down the street, and I stay in Alto Paraiso when I go there. You walk down the street in Alto Paraiso and you meet 10 people, and they're from 10 different countries. It's typical to sit down at communal dinner at one of the little restaurants there, and you're speaking to someone from Germany, someone from India, someone from Russia, someone from France, someone from the US. People from all over the world come there and coexist.
Right.
Successfully.
Maybe that's something we can all learn one day, to coexist. I think it'd be beneficial.
Pardon?
I said, I think it'd be beneficial if we all learned to coexist.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I wonder if somehow, the Templars may have done some type of initiation process there that just draws these people in. Because people, if you ask them, why are you here? Why did you come? Why did you settle in Alto Paraiso? And they all tell you, it's just, I came here once and I can't leave, or it just drew me. I mean, people say the same things over and over and over, and it doesn't matter where they're from. There is something special. There is a feeling there. There's something there it's magical. I really don't know what else to call it, because it is very magical.
We can probably get close to wrapping this one up. Before we do, I would like for you to let the audience know where they can find your documentary and your book and everything else.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I have a website, and it's www.templarsinbrazil.com. And you can go there for updates on anything, on the films that are coming out. Currently, like I said, the first documentary has just recently been licensed by Amazon Prime. So that'll be coming out on Amazon Prime, I don't know, any day, as soon as they get it into their queue. And all the information will be on my website. You can find anything you need to know, where I'm going to be speaking. I'm going to be at Conscious Life Expo in February. I also go to several Masonic lodges and speak all around North America. At this point, it's just North America. I also speak in London, several parts in England and Portugal, around the world. But you can find all that information on the website. I have a tour that's coming up on October 2025 with Hamilton White from the Lost Relics. And he and I have put together a really phenomenal tour, a Grail quest we're offering next October 25. And so you can sign up for that. And my book is a Grail Quest and Discovery of a Mysterious Knights Templar Cave in Brazil. And you can get that on Amazon. And also, if you want to PM me through Messenger, my Facebook page is Templars in Brazil, the Templars in Brazil. Also, my other Facebook page is Kathleen Ball, and you can message me, and I will send you an autographed copy of the book. So there's a number of ways. I'm on TikTok right now. I'm doing the Grail Quest, a series of levels of how you enter onto a Grail Quest of your own. What are the steps? What are the stages? How to work through certain blocks. There's, all those things that come along as you're moving through your Grail Quest. So I'm doing that on TikTok right now. We're up to level 8. Level 9, excuse me. I just completed level 9 of that. And on Instagram, Templars in Brazil. And I think that's about it.
You're a lot more active on social media than I am. I don't even try and mess with TikTok or any of that stuff. I have one. I created one because everyone says I had to have one, but I don't mess with it. I don't know how to use it. I don't know anything about it.
Oh, TikTok?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty easy. It's actually pretty easy. I don't subscribe to a lot of the other pages. There's a lot of political stuff on there right now, unfortunately. But there's some good people. There's a gal, Dana, I'm trying to think what her last name is, but she's talking about plasma. There's a couple of really good researchers on TikTok. Oh, I also have a YouTube page. I forgot about that. And I have several YouTube episodes on YouTube. I think we're up to the 5th or 6th one now. So you can go on that and the Grail Quest on YouTube. So there's that too.
I will make sure to link your website and other information in the show notes for anyone listening.
Okay, great. That would be awesome. Yeah, if you send me a link to the show, I can also put it on all my social media. So
okay. Yeah, I can do that once I get it all edited and figured out when it's going to come out.
Okay, that sounds wonderful.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's the show, everyone. I really hope you guys enjoyed the conversations. If you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to the contact section of tinfoiltales.com. Just get your message to me. We'll get something scheduled for a future episode. And just remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.
Tinfoil Tales in my headphones. Yeah, it's time to rock. Got a story about a cryptic creature. Let's take a walk. Bigfoot, dogman, they're out there in the dark. But the truth is out there like an alien spark. UFO sightings got the whole world shook. Conspiracies unfold like a story in a book. Media control, trying to keep us blind. But oh, before gonna use my own mind. In history, they don't want us to know the secrets they hide, the truth they won't show. Dominate our society, they keep us in chains. But I'm standing tall, it's time to break the reins. Control, trying to keep us blind. But I won't be fooled, gonna use my own mind. In history